Hello, in this video we will look at scatterplots, correlation, and linear regression. So our goal in this section is to determine if there is a relationship between two variables. And so I'm actually going to start by putting a small data set down. So I'll have one variable x and another variable y, and I'm going to list some values in a table. My values for x are going to be 1, 6, 4, 3, 7, and 2. And the y values will be 2, 5, 3, 3, 4, and 1. So here are my two variables, and I want to know if there is a relationship, if these variables are associated with one another. Really, in particular, I'm looking to see if the variable x has any sort of an effect or impact on variable y. So one thing that I can do is to look at a visual representation of the data, and that is with a scatter plot. And so I'm going to do that now. A scatter plot works much like the process of plotting ordered pairs. I'm going to start with two axes, an x-axis and a y-axis. I'll add some scale. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And there's my origin. And so I'll start by treating these as an ordered pair. So the first ordered pair has an x-coordinate of 1 and a y-coordinate of 2. So I'll go over to 1 on my x-axis, go up 2 spaces, and then you can put any mark you want. I'm going to use an asterisk. And next I'll go to 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll put another mark here. The ordered pair for 3, 1, 2, 3, that's here. 3, 3 would be here. 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally 2, 1 would be here. So I have one marker for each of the pairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so for instance, this ordered pair, this marker, which I know has the coordinates 7, 4, I know represents this ordered pair in my data set. So all right, so now that I've constructed the scatter plot, what can this tell me about the relationship between these two variables? There are two things that I'm going to question. Firstly, is there a direction to the association? One possibility is that there is a positive association. And this would be indicated by an upward trend from left to right in the scatter plot. And notice that we're seeing that here. As I move from left to right, I notice that my points are generally moving higher along the y-axis. So I think that this is a positive association in this scatter plot. And what that means is higher values of x are associated with higher values of y. And notice here, I've got a higher value of x, 7, and relatively speaking, a higher value of y, as opposed to here on the other end, where I have a low value of x, 2, with a low value of y. With a negative association, we'll see a downward trend. And again, this is from left to right. So I'm going to say left to right. And that would mean that there is, so I'll say meaning higher values of x are associated with, now, not higher values of y, but rather lower values of y. So a downward trend might look something like this. So generally speaking, as we move from left to right, our scatter plot is showing this downward trend. Now in this case, like this point here would have a high x value but a low y value, as opposed to, for instance, this guy, which would have a low x value but a high y value. So this is a downward trend and this is an upward trend. The second thing that we could look for is a pattern. And I'm going to keep it simple and just say that our options here are linear, nonlinear, or just no pattern at all. So if we're looking for for the linear pattern, so here's this guy. If there's a linear pattern, you would expect the points in your scatter to fall on or near a straight line. So in this case, I would say that these points generally fall on or near this straight line. For a nonlinear, there may be a pattern, but it's just not going to be a straight line. So for example, you may see something like this in a scatter plot. So this is definitely a pattern. It's like a U shape. Really, we'd say that this looks like, in math, a parabola. And there may be a quadratic association here. It's not linear, so we're just going to call this nonlinear. By the way, I'll give you one more example of nonlinear that comes up. In particular, if you're doing looking at something over time, sometimes you'll see a pattern like this, where something seems to rise and fall periodically. So that's definitely a pattern. It's not a straight line pattern. So both of these we would just say it's a pattern, but it's not a straight line. It is non-linear. Now the final option here would be there's just no pattern. And so for that, we would just expect some sort of random display in our scatter plot. So maybe things are just all over the place. So that would be no pattern. So again, to construct the scatter plot, we'll plot ordered pairs. We'll take a minute to look at the direction. Is there a positive association, an upward trend, or a negative association, a downward trend? And then secondly, do we see any sort of pattern? Maybe a linear pattern, a nonlinear pattern, or no pattern at all. In the next video, we'll look at the correlation coefficient, R, which is a measure, so something that's not so subjective, and so a measure of this direction and linear pattern for a pair of variables.